Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, council members, city officials, and our streaming audience. I would like to welcome everyone to the September 26th City Council meeting. We have 10 items on our agenda this evening. We are meeting here in the chambers for public attendance, and we're streaming live on YouTube. Moving forward, if you would, Ms. Moss, would you continue with the roll call of our members?
Thank you, President Gallagher. Anthony Phillips.
Here.
Payne. Nickerson. Farrow.
Here.
Henderson.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Greg Phillips.
Here.
Prohl.
Do we have a motion to excuse Mr. Prohl from tonight's meeting? He had sent a message today that he had a conflict with his schedule and had requested to be excused. I have a motion by Ms. Nickerson, seconded by Mr. Farrow. Roll call on the motion to excuse Mr. Prohl.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
The motion passes. At this time, would you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you, everyone. The minutes of the previous meeting have been distributed for review. Do we have any additions or corrections to the minutes from the previous meeting? We do not. Do I have a motion to accept the minutes as they are? I have a motion by Ms. Henderson, seconded by Mr. Greg Phillips. Roll call on the motion to accept the minutes.
Preston.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
The minutes have been accepted. We'll now move to the reports of our committees. We'll begin with the Community Affair Committee. Mr. Greg Phillips.
Thank you, President Gehringer. Community Affairs does not have any agenda items on this evening, and we have nothing new to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to the Human Resource Committee, Ms. Payne.
Thank you, President Gehringer. Human Resources has 3 items on the agenda tonight. Items 4, 5, and 6. Item number 4 is at the third read, and it's an ordinance number 22-088, appropriating funds to cover an increase in cost of citywide property and casualty insurance policies, and declaring an emergency. I think we've already paid that bill, but we need to pass this. Item number 5 is at a second read, and it's a resolution approving the 2023 health insurance benefits for city employees. And then item number 6 is at a second read, and that is a resolution confirming appointments of Dr. Richard Villarreal and Dr. Brandy Spalding to the Ross County Health District Board. That concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving next to the Finance Committee with Mr. Tony Phillips.
President Gehringer, we have one item on the agenda tonight. It would be number 9 on the agenda. It's a first reading, an ordinance appropriating $4,000 for the use towards the purchase of a credit card machine and monthly credit card machine service charges for the remainder of the year. That's all that Finance has tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to the Development Committee, Ms. Nickerson.
Thank you. Development has nothing on the agenda tonight, and therefore we have nothing to report. Thank you.
Thank you. Next to Parks and Recreation Committee with Ms. Henderson.
Thank you, President Gehringer. We have no items on tonight's agenda. However, I do have a couple fun announcements. So earlier this month, I just want to spotlight this. Earlier this month, Mr. Walter Smith from the Chiillicothe Tree Commission and Mr. Todd Ferentz from Pixel met with and taught approximately 75 students from the different county schools for the day as part of a Careers in Agriculture and Natural Resources. So I thought that was a wonderful thing for them to give back to our community. Also, we've been told to be on the lookout for spotted lantern flies in the area. And then the Tales of the Undead at the Sugarloaf Mountain Amphitheater will begin on Saturday. And we have some new gateway signage to be coming for Chiillicothe, and it looks phenomenal. That is all I have.
Thank you. Next to Safety Service Committee with Ms. Preston.
Thank you, President Geringer. We had a committee meeting last Monday. Safety Service Committee did. We talked about 4 different items. One was the livestock within the city limits. It's going to be item number 7 on the agenda. It's going to be a second reading and ordinance amending section 505.14 of the codified ordinances of the city of Chiillicothe as it pertains to livestock being kept or harbored within the corporation limits of the city of Chiillicothe. We heard from Assistant Law Director Jason Miller, who had originally drafted this. We had some complaints from a citizen, and Assistant Law Director Miller advised to go ahead with the legislation the way that it was already written. We also talked about appropriation of funds for fire department exams, and that was approved to move forward. That'll be on the next council's agenda. And then we also talked about Axon body camera lease for the police department, which is something that it's a rotating lease every 3 years. We also talked about the committed legislation, criminal trespass. It was suggested by Law Director Villarreal to remove the exemptions that were in there in the law, so we did do that, and now there are some issues with that, so we're trying to determine what to do with that committed legislation. Okay, so it's still going to remain committed on the agenda for right now. We do have one other, let's see, I think we've got another item on the agenda. It's an ordinance appropriating it's a first reading, appropriating $9,962.80 for the purchase of 10 new computers for the Chiillicothe Police Department and declaring emergency. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving next to our engineering, as well as our City Service and Transit Committee, both chaired by Mr. Farrow.
Thank you. On behalf of City Services and Transit, we have nothing on the agenda and nothing to report. Number 1 for engineering, we do have item number 10 on the agenda, which is the first reading of an ordinance approving placement of a Greater Chiillicothe and Ross County Development Corporation sign on the city right-of-way at Gateway Drive and declaring an emergency. At the appropriate time, I am going to ask that we waive the 3-read rule on this item so they can get the sign installed prior to the weather changing. And right before at 6:30, we had an engineering committee meeting for the application and if we are given any funds, grant funds if awarded, to accept those. And that is for a yearly application for the OPWC commission. And at the appropriate time, I am going to ask for us to amend tonight's agenda to add that item to it, as well as ask to waive the 3-day receipt rule due to council getting that kind of late. The end date for that is October 7th. Application date is due October 7th before we meet again. And that is all I have to report for this evening. Thank you.
And lastly, our Utilities Committee. In the absence of Mr. Poole, does anyone from that committee have a report? From there, we'll move to the reports of our officials. Our mayor, Mr. Luke Feeney.
Got it. Thank you, President Geringer. Just a quick one for me tonight. First, I want to thank Councilman Farrow and the Law Director's Office for moving quickly on the legislation around our OPWC application. That deadline is before our next regularly scheduled meeting. The resolution will allow us to apply for upwards of $300,000 in grant funds. And we're appreciative of both the Law Director and her office and Councilman Farrow moving quickly for us. There will be a legislation request coming from us. The way OPWC works, the timing is somewhat odd, and we did just find out within the last couple of weeks that the application that we put in last year, we weren't awarded in the initial round. We had asked for something like $323,000. We will receive $155,000. And it appears the request that we had put in last year was for related like this one to paving and stormwater work. It appears that we will be able to utilize those funds this year to expand our paving program by about $170,000, $180,000. So you will receive a committee assignment request from us this week on that topic to move that forward. And then on that note, with paving, it has been an interesting paving season, as with all things. The supply chains and cost of doing business was up this year, but it has been a good paving program. And to fill folks in on High Street in particular, which if you've not been on High Street lately, good for you. But High Street has had a series of quite a bit of work done actually by Columbia Gas and its contractors to do gas line repairs and updates. That portion of High Street is actually a shared roadway, so the responsibility of paving that road is actually shared between the city and ODOT, much like State Route 50. It was not on our paving schedule for the year 2022, but we've had conversations with ODOT because we look to the future to plan ahead for our paving program. And so it was actually several years out, but obviously we can't wait several years. And so we actually worked with Columbia Gas, who appreciate their cooperation on the project. And so we're going to end up getting all of High Street paved. Right now it's currently scheduled not to be paved this week, but next. It'll result in several days of closure, but will actually allow for parts of High Street that they did not do construction to get paved, and should be a dramatic upgrade when it's complete. So I just want to thank the public for their patience with that project. It has been, particularly the way the roadway was patched with concrete, because the work was done in the winter, makes it an especially bumpy ride. So thanks for the patience there. I did want to comment on another roadway. I mentioned OPWC, that's Ohio Public Works Commission, and we have a grant from a couple years ago that we will apply to work on Bellevue. Bellevue's in pretty bad shape as well. The project there is a big one. It involves improvements to water lines, sewer lines, storm sewer lines, and paving, and it's broken into two sections. At this point, we're not going to be able to do that major work this fall. So that major work, which will include the paving, at least of the upper half, in addition to those line repairs and that sort of thing, will be a spring or summer project of next year. But we're looking into how we can make some temporary repairs to make it an easier road to pass, particularly this winter. So that's I guess a brief summary of our paving program. Still a fair bit of paving to go. And then once all of the paving is complete, a separate contractor comes in to do the striping work, And so we will see a fair bit of, all of the roads that were just paved, if they call for striping, we'll have striping. And then we're in conversation with that same contractor right now to expand the striping into roads that weren't recently repaved, but are in need of striping for just updates for striping. And finally, in that paving program, something that we're starting to do, we did a test run of it last year, but we're doing it at a bigger scale this year, is essentially I guess it'd be best described as a fogging treatment that goes down basically within a year or two after new pavement is done. And it essentially seals new pavement to give it longer lasting, I think it's 2 to 3 years of additional life off of the standard paving. And so you might see some of that, and nothing to worry about if you see that. And then the other thing we've been doing more frequently is called crack sealing, and it's where you see the black squiggly lines. And that's another one that we try to do. You actually want to do it the same way within a year or two of the roadway being paved. It's not as useful several years down the road when the cracks are bigger. So it's another thing that is sort of done right after the paving is complete to extend the duration. And so those are things we're adding into annual programming to try and extend the useful life of roadways. And then finally, on in reference to roadways and sewer lines, the roadway, the intersection of Watt and Water is reopened. That was a major disruption to that neighborhood and to our sewer lines. And I just want to thank, first and foremost, the folks who live over there for their patience with us. Between the traffic pattern and the smell, pretty disruptive. And so thanks to the Utilities Department for their work there, for council for moving quickly to get those funds appropriated, but mostly for the folks in that neighborhood and their patience. And with that, I'll conclude my report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Next to our Law Director, Ms. Villarreal.
Thank you. We're just working hard trying to get all this legislation corrected, completed, and where it needs to be. And you're keeping us pretty busy. That's our report.
President Geringer, I forgot to mention the auditor was under the weather tonight. She wanted me to report that she does not have any report.
Terrific. Thank you. We hope she gets feeling better. Moving on to audience participation. Council Rule 22 does limit each speaker to 5-minute presentations, total limitation of 15 minutes per any single subject. If you get to the point where you're getting close to 1 minute left, I'll try to indicate to you to summarize your presentation. Anyone who wishes to speak, we do need for our records your name and address.
Myers, 557 East 5th. Great to see everybody here tonight, but I think everyone's here for something that's not even on our agenda, but I do want to address. I just want to say this committed homeless legislation, I think we're not taking the best approach on it right now. I know Councilwoman Preston is doing everything that she feels is in her best vision for the city. She's trying to help people, trying to clean up the streets and get people assistance and make sure they have the vouchers that they need, and giving law enforcement the resources that they need to enforce the legislation as well. She has a vision. Reverend Williams back here, he has a vision that is completely different than that of the councilwoman. And first of all, thanks for your service on council, because even if we agree or disagree, it takes a lot to be on council. So we appreciate your service, and of course, you were working at the police department for quite some time. So thank you for that service, and thank you, Reverend Williams, for your service, because you too not only serve God but the public in your capacity. But you guys have two different visions, two very different visions of how to execute this legislation. And It's taking a lot of time and a lot of resources and a lot of participation from the people sitting behind me. The law director says she's staying very busy on this legislation. Thank you for your service. I know we don't always agree on things, but it takes a lot to hold your job too. So thank you for your service. But pushing the homeless into the highways, that's what this particular legislation I think will do. My company, we have an office space in downtown. We have 2 office spaces, but one of them is right by the homeless shelter. And they kick the homeless people out of the shelter in the morning. I think it's like around 8 o'clock. That's when I start seeing them trickle out. And they have nowhere to go during the day. Nowhere to go. And I met a gentleman back here in the back row. And I forget his name. I wrote down his name's Steven. He was telling me, I asked him, I said, when I came up, he's homeless. I said, you know, what happens when they kick people out of the shelter during the day? Where do you guys go? And I look out my office window and I see a dozen, sometimes 24 homeless people. They're laying in the grass. They have nowhere to go during the day. Nothing to do. They might have somewhere to go at night, which might keep them from getting arrested if the committed legislation comes off, but nothing to do in the day. So I asked Stephen, I said, so what can we do as a community to help you guys? What can we do? And he says, we need a network. We need a network of things to do during the day. I was speaking to a lady earlier who works down at the library. She says a lot of the homeless people come into the library during the day. They use the computers. You know, maybe these people have mental health issues. Maybe they have drug addiction issues. Maybe they just don't have money. I don't know what their problem might be or what the underlying issue is. But what I do know is the amount of energy and effort that we have put into this committed legislation, including everyone behind me who is out here tonight. If we could just take the time and put together maybe a coalition, Community Action's doing everything they can. There's other organizations that are doing everything they can. But we don't have one central coalition. We don't have one leader. We need somebody, maybe that's the mayor's office or someone to come together and say, hey, we are going to all come together. Julie Preston's going to come together. Reverend Williams is going to come together. Community Action, all the other organizations that are helping. We're all going to come together. We're going to have a coalition, and we're going to have one approach to fixing this issue. Because there's so many people, so many cooks in the kitchen, but nothing's getting done. We all come to council. Everyone complains. Legislation might get passed. Referendums might happen. But at the end of the day, the people are getting kicked out of the homeless shelter during the day, and they have nowhere to go but the library. So we need to put in a network in place. And I'll finish off with this. I know my time's almost up. When I was 5 years old, I was actually homeless. My mom and I, we lived in a homeless shelter in Washington Courthouse. And I remember walking up the steps when I was 5, and it was Easter 1996. And we only got that Easter basket because the community came together. And so I'm asking that you guys come together before you pass this legislation. Somebody needs to take leadership in this position. Maybe that's Councilwoman Preston. Maybe that's the mayor's office. Maybe that's Reverend Williams. But there needs to be a coalition together to make this network happen. Because as Stephen said, if they had transportation, or if they knew how to utilize the transportation, if they knew how to apply for jobs, if they had that network during the day, maybe we could get them off of the streets during the day. And one final question, and I hate to put you on the spot, Ms. Villarreal, but if someone's charged with this particular piece of crime, how does the law director's office intend to handle it when it goes through the municipal court? Are you guys going to offer diversion? Are you guys going to try to get resources in place for them, or are they simply just going to be convicted? Okay, I understand. Well, hopefully, you know, the sheriff certainly, and I can't speak for the sheriff's office, even though we have Captain Preston here, or Major Preston. I don't even know what his title is. He's always getting promoted. But the sheriff doesn't want to house anybody because they're running out of space. So the police department don't want to arrest people if they don't have to. Ms. Preston has what she wants to do to help people. Reverend Williams wants to help people. The mayor wants to help people. Let's just somebody step up to the freaking plate and take leadership, and let's get the coalition, all the interested parties at the table instead of fighting. Thank you.
Jason Link, 17 Mead Drive here in the city. Not here to talk about the homeless issue, but to talk about chickens and goats and cows and pigs again. Unfortunately, I was not able to be at the committee meeting last Monday. I had something committed on my schedule. I would encourage committee meetings to be announced greater than 48 hours in advance of when they are going to be, if in fact council folks want public input at the grassroots level rather than at this level. It may be legal to do that, but it certainly doesn't encourage participation by those in the community when a limited amount of time is given. I understand that the legislation that's on for a second read is the same legislation that was before you all back in July, and it was sent back to committee. There was a one committee meeting. There was no changes made to the legislation. I still have the continued concerns with the legislation. There's confusing language in the legislation. There's conflicting language in the ordinance. The ordinance, if it passes as it is, there's also alphabetical and numerical ordering issues within the ordinance. There's 2 sections that are labeled B, and there's also 2 sections labeled number 1 in section number B. So if you have the ordinance in front of you, I can point that out. I don't see many of you having it in front of you, so maybe that's not helpful, but it really seems like maybe this was an ordinance that was taken from some other municipality and given to Chiillicothe. I have spent an enormous amount of time on this ordinance. It's broken down into those who have 0 to 5 acres, 5 to 10 acres, and above 10 acres. The question I'd like to ask the committee is, did they look at how many parcels in the city of Chiillicothe are 5 acres? Did they look at how many parcels are 5 to 10 acres? Did they look at how many parcels are more than 10 acres? I would be hard pressed to imagine there's a lot of parcels within the city of Chiillicothe that fit into those categories, and so they seem rather, dare I say, discriminatory towards those who only have larger parcels. The legislation is clearly discriminatory against those who are in 4-H, limiting the animals that can be housed within the city. I think a 2-acre plot would certainly hold any of the 4-H animals very easily. But my concern is not just with 4-H animals, my concern is with the public as well. The public who maybe wants to have chickens or maybe wants to have goats in their backyard, maybe wants to have a pig in their backyard. I understand that there's been concern expressed about chickens running loose in the city, and I would have a concern about chickens running loose in the city as well. The current ordinance that we're still under deals with that. This ordinance deals with that. The nuisance officer would be the one who would come in and handle that. I'm not sure who our nuisance officer is. Not sure if they're trained at all in caring for or understanding the needs of livestock. But at least that's handled within the legislation. Just have a continued concern with the overall process. I have reached out, Julie, Anna, several times. Other folks within the 4-H community, within the Ross County Fair community have reached out, and we've not gotten a single response. And that's frustrating as a public citizen that has concern and has expressed that concern. I'm not trying to do what's best for me. I'm trying to do what's best for our whole community. And another issue that's been brought up, I've heard from at least one person, is the smell. It would be interesting if any council person has gone to a 4-H member's house that has a pig, that has a cow. I think you'd be amazed at how clean those spaces are. 4-H kids take care of these animals like they're pets. We don't have to worry and be concerned about smells and odors wafting into the air. And again, that's taken care of in the legislation. If there is odors, then it's the duty of the nuisance officer to take care of that. I continue to offer my support, my help, anything that I can do to make this the best legislation possible. I reached out to other people within the 4-H community about this meeting, but unfortunately, again, they have other meetings on the schedule. This was only put out on Friday, that there was going to be a meeting about this. And so it's hard to get people here on a Monday when there's such limited time to let people know when this legislation is going to be discussed. Would implore the council to not vote yes on this second read, to send it back to the committee, and so that the committee can truly have open conversation, dialogue about this legislation, so we can make it the best, not just for me, not just for you, but for all the people in the city of Chiillicothe. Thank you for your time.
Reverend, I wanted to comment. You'd mentioned that you had reached out to the law director's office. Just so you know, we're not trying to ignore you, but it's improper for us to respond. It could be construed as legal advice to a layperson, and we're not permitted to do that. So your correspondence needed to be to the council people, and if they have issues, then they come to us. Okay. Right. Right.
So you're not supposed to respond.
We don't. Okay. We deal with the council, and I just wanted to comment to you that, because you said we didn't respond or we didn't. I just wanted to tell you, I didn't want to take it personally.
I've never been invited to talk about parties. Brad, well, represent there. It would be very important, I think very valuable. Bringing the players to the table that have input and knowledge about working rather than.
I understand your concerns. I'm just telling you, we don't make up the legislation. We don't have a vote here. He and I are guests. So this is the council session, and they're the ones that tell us what we need.
Can I speak? Sure. So, Reverend Link, I'm going to speak on what you've said. I've responded to you a few times via email, and it told you that my position on the legislation. This has been going on since 2019. I inherited the legislation. When you talk about the 4-H executive, Mr. Kazenza, other parties, they all were here and they all approved, they all agreed with the legislation that we redrafted. I'm sorry that it's not what you want to hear, but we cannot make everybody happy, okay? And I understand your position. I understand your heart and how much you love 4-H and FFA, but we went out of our way to add all that language into that legislation. And the one woman that you talk about, she was instrumental in helping with that. So, you know, I'm going to reiterate what Assistant Law Director Jason Miller said several months ago when we first, and this hasn't been decided at one meeting. We had several meetings before you ever became involved. So it's you know, it's not that we can make everybody happy. And that's what Assistant Law Director Jason Miller said. We have to think about all the citizens in the city of Chiillicothe, not just one. And so far, it's just been you continually complaining about it. Nobody else has had any complaints about it.
So I take offense at that. I'm not complaining about it. I am trying to bring solutions to the table. I'm trying to bring solutions to the table. Julie, yes, you have emailed me back, but what you've emailed back is that it's at the law director's office. You've emailed back that we've done what we could do with it. And the concerns that I've expressed, the questions that I've asked have not been answered. There's really simple, basic questions about why are some animals considered large animals and other animals are considered small animals. And maybe there's answers to those questions. I don't think it's inappropriate for me to expect an answer to that question. Brad Kazenza and Kate Wells do not approve of this legislation. I can guarantee you that. I spoke with both of them over the weekend and today. Unfortunately, they both have meetings tonight. They're not able to be here. They do not approve of this legislation. And we will make sure that at the third reading of this, that the gallery will be extra packed. If that's the tactic that you're going to take, then we'll make sure that there's plenty of supporters against this legislation at the third reading. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I've got something to say about this piece of legislation. In the first place, I'd like to know where the Reverend got his piece of legislation to review. In the second place, this has been going on for too long. I have been suffering with chickens in the backyard. My backyard's small, and my fence should not be used as a border for the chickens. The chickens shouldn't run loose in the backyard with no cover. My sister-in-law lives on McKell. I live on Comanche. I'm Janet Griffith, 603 Comanche Road. My sister-in-law lives on McKell. She's got chickens in the backyard, touching her backyard there in the corner. Her husband goes to clean the flower beds out and stuff. They stink like mad. They do stink. Their feces or their chicken poop carries flies. I can't sit on my deck without flies. I have to turn a fan on because there's flies. This is the small yards. I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know where he lives. I don't know how big of a yard he has. But if you come and visit my house, my yard is small, and the backyard facing my yard with the fence between them, which is my redwood fence, which is getting pecked by the chickens and ruined, is there, and they're small. We need something done. And the thing is, freedoms. Where does freedom begin and end? It's somebody's right to have pigs, goats, cows, and chickens in the city. No, it isn't. Those were rural farm animals, and that's what they were meant to be. So, chickens for eggs. Well, then have the big yard to do it. Keep them off your neighbor's property lines and keep them housed and clean up their poop. So we have responsibilities here. It's nice for everybody to come and impose their thoughts when they're not suffering through it. There's lots of chickens in this city now, and our city is a city. It's not a dump. It's not we've got to start considering everybody's rights, not just a few. So, and I'm sorry, but this has been going on with me for almost 2 years. And Tara Gillum, I think that's what her name was good. She came, she looked at my property, she took pictures. She left and left it with Julie. I'm sorry that this is left with somebody. I'm sorry Julie has this mess. She has lots of messes. But we need something done, and we need something done fast. So please vote to get rid of those farm animals out of our city. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Stephen Roof. I'm here to talk about that homeless issue you guys have. I think I have a solution for you guys. Permanent solution for your homeless problem. If you guys coordinate like that guy was talking about, you guys have to coordinate certain things though. Like assisted living for the mentally ill. They don't know how to house themselves, so they obviously need assisted living. The rapid rehousing program you guys have in this town requires us to basically house and find the place ourselves. I don't even know how to do that, and look how smart I am. I don't know how to pay bills. I don't know how to get an apartment. I've never done it before. So without a program, I'm on the street too. I'm not even allowed at your homeless shelter because I'm a medical marijuana patient. I'm forced to camp on your streets. So I would be one of the ones going to jail. I'm not allowed to take a shower at the shelter. I'm not allowed to get food at the shelter. That's why I've been flying a sign in your town getting food from pedestrians and whatnot. I don't have a choice. But I have a solution, permanent solution. If you guys put the mentally ill in assisted living, you take care of that side. The drug addiction side, if they want to quit drugs, then root for them. If they don't, then that's their choice. But if they do, you should have the homeless shelter, give them rides to find a job, give them rides to find housing, and help them do it. And if you need the funds for it, they estimated my book at $187 million a year, and it finally took off. Pretty soon, I'm going to be very rich, and I don't want none of the money. So if you need the funds, you get a hold of somebody that can get a hold of me, probably somebody at the outreach center. But within a couple months, I'm probably going to be looking at a lot. And I just finished my second book. It comes out on the 1st of the month. It's only 13 pages long, and it can reverse heroin overdoses by 50% around the world. My mom overdosed and died while I was writing it. But I will spend all the money I'm making and all the money I walked for to help you guys with this solution. But if I do it, I want the solution to spread out from here. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you, guys.
Good evening. I'm Bill Showman. I live at 32 South Hickory Street, 500 feet or less from the homeless shelter. I want to start by saying I'd rather be about anywhere doing anything than standing here with you tonight. I have some things to say. I'm very disappointed. I mean, I guess that's the biggest thing that I want to get across. And the things that I have to say, I hope you all will vote against this legislation and prove me wrong. I mean, riddle me this. So homeless folks, by definition, do not have any private property of their own, and obviously cannot use another's private property without consent, correct? Therefore, meaning the only place left for them to go is public spaces, obviously. And now we want to criminalize the utilization of public spaces, claiming that law enforcement needs you to pass this legislation to appropriately be able to do their jobs. Except I've not heard law enforcement say such, and that has not been reported to the media by law enforcement. And I don't think anyone is clear in what specifically law enforcement has requested or needs, or how this legislation accomplishes assisting them in any way other than mandating they force homeless folks to move along or be incarcerated. So help me understand, where are homeless folks supposed to go? We have already established there aren't enough beds for homeless people in the shelters. Many don't feel safe in the shelters. Others are not capable of following the rules of the shelter due to long-standing illnesses. Directly, beyond all those nuances, there simply are not enough beds, period. We know that homelessness has increased by over 300% in the most recent couple of years. This is well documented. Also useful information when someone may want to pursue litigation against this cruel and unusual piece of legislation. We see it every day. We know that there are not enough beds to meet the need, and something needs to be done about it. But this legislation, criminalizing homelessness, is not it. Again, I ask, what space is available to homeless folks? This question should be the priority. We can't. Why can't we allow them to continue utilizing these public spaces? Are they deemed invisible just because they're homeless? Not human? Less than? Not deserving? Is this the message you're all intentionally sending? Because that is what is coming across loud and exceptionally clear. Why you have all these people here tonight? You may have deemed them invisible, but I guarantee you're going to see me. Why can't we increase sanitation services at our public spaces? Why can't we increase law enforcement presence to allow for increased safety of these public spaces? Why weren't those actions the first line of reasoning to improve this problem? Why can't our city leaders work with social service agencies to find solutions to this big problem? At the least alleviate some of the burden. How many city council members reached out to or attended the continuum of care meeting or representative? The only person I saw was Councilwoman Nickerson. It's shameful that you did not include the experts when committing this legislation. Who's going to pay for homeless people to sit in jail? Thank you. Do we really want to be creating criminal records for folks that just because they happen to be homeless? I mean, what planet does that make sense? Criminal records can negatively affect future employment and housing status, which will only deepen the struggle to find housing. There is zero logic in this legislation other than to be cruel. Oh, but City Council removed the word homeless from the legislation. That's fine. But who else would this ordinance be applied to other than people that are homeless? The intent is still exceptionally clear, no matter how vague. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Nancy McNeely, a former city employee. I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name.
Bill Showman.
Okay, Mr. Showman. One thing he said raised a red flag to me, and that he said that homelessness has gone up 300% in the past 2 years. Where are these people coming from? Are we getting people from different counties?
No. Can I answer the question that you asked?
Do you have the data to support that? I mean, I'm wondering if they're bringing them in from other counties other than right here. It's a logical question.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is a logical question if you say that it's gone up 300%. So that was my concern. And why is there such an increase?
Because rent's gone up.
As far as the laws go, I trust Mrs. Preston's knowledge on it because she was a police officer for a number of years. She did a lot for the community when she was a police officer. She's done a lot for the community serving on council. So I feel like there's people coming down hard on her. And, you know, I think our police officers have to face so much today. And, you know, I think that laws should apply equally to everybody. And I think everybody can live with that. But we have laws in place, we have laws on the books, and those should be obeyed.
We've reached our 15 minutes on the topic of criminal trespass.
Young man, please. I'm going to use my time to answer his question he wasn't allowed. My name is George Stepp. I live at 310 Clay Street. I'm a homeowner. But the thing is, this is on Clay Street, a lot of people are diverted on Bridge Street because there's no sidewalk, and they walk right past my house every day. I see them every day. And on the grace of God, I was fortunate enough to actually rent a house. My last landlord, one awesome landlord. Landlord before her was an awesome landlord. My last landlord, which was Mrs. Nickerson right there and her late husband, they were nice enough to honor my rent. I bought a house for the same price that I rented from her 15 years ago. And all on Clay Street, a lot of the elderly people are dying. Their kids live in the suburbs. I got 4 houses just in the last year that went from $525 and $550 a month to $850 to $925. With that being said, some people just can't afford it. And when I first moved here 20 years ago, even the law enforcement, I am a 21-time loser of being robbed. And it's not even in my yard. I'm talking even in my house. And what did the police department say? Oh, they're coming from Cincinnati and Columbus and all the drugs and all that. The only man that I've met that was not from this town that's homeless is Mr. Stevenson that just left. And he told me about his book. That man is an advocate for homeless people. He's walked across America twice. And I've made that stereotype one time in front of Burger King on Bridge Street. I seen this elderly man with a backpack and his dog. I bought him a cheeseburger and all that. I tried to give him $20. He's like, I don't want your money. He pulled out a map. He came from Hillsboro and got on 50, which runs into town. Just like Mayor Freely said, we have to share the highways with. And he's like, I'm a retired gunny. I've walked across the United States twice. He's walked to Hatfield and McCoy's, and now he's walking Route 50. And I stereotyped that man and thought he was homeless. So I called JC Taxi to take them from Burger King on Bridge Street all the way out by Londonderry on Route 50. And JC Taxi said, we don't take vagrants. That gunny pulled out his wallet, says, what do you take hundreds? He had well over $1,800 on him. But that's how some people treats people. There's an old saying, don't kick a dog when he's down. And there's 4 verses in the Bible. I read easy readers. There's another one called BSE, whatever. Yes. That's just in modern language. Easy reader is actually written in the 3rd grade and the 4th grade level. And the 4 things in that Bible, 3 of them was people was crawling and trying to kiss God's feet. And God said, get off the ground. I can't help you unless you stand up. And the thing is I don't know this law. I just heard about it 24 hours or 48 hours ago about this law. It ain't going to help no one out. And then the other thing is about law enforcement. It's the perception. I had a guy, he's a hillbilly. We had a bonfire in the backyard. He popped up a tent. The police department tried to arrest him because they thought he was homeless. And I got involved because it's my backyard, it's my personal property. He's like, why is he sleeping in your backyard? I said, let me ask you this. Have you ever been to Gettysburg, Tennessee? Oh, yeah, I took the family there. Great place. I said, what's the difference between city people going into the country and camping than country people going in the city and camping? They said it's all rules and regulations. I told him, you're a veterans advocate. I said, go back to Tennessee, and straight out said, no person that lives in the city that has a city ordinance against homeless or camping in there is no longer around in Tennessee. I yield the rest of my time. It's a sad day for America. Very sad day.
We've reached the 15 minutes on that topic. Motion by Ms. Nickerson to extend the time. Second on the motion. No second, that will be the end of the topic. Thank you.
I didn't hear you. What?
That's the end of the
Why is it you always want to shut me up? I don't know. Okay. I just want to know when the committee meetings are ahead of time, and I want the minutes, and I want to be able to be there. And you need to have homeless representation on the committee, Julia. Okay. And you all that think you know about homelessness, really do some research on it, honest. Really do some research on it. It's not a Chiillicothe problem. It's a national, international problem, and our federal government is not giving us what we need, but we're working on it, and we can work together to make it better. Okay, and also, constitutional rights are being broken
Ma'am,
by this legislation.
Meeting, and that's not right.
we will now go on to old business. Oh, do you have another topic, sir? Yep.
My name's the Reverend Terry Williams. I reside at 47.5 East Main Street, and I'm here to talk about the chickens tonight, since other topics are off the agenda. So I found it interesting. My colleague, the Reverend Dr. Jason Link, who is a fine colleague, I must say, when Jason came to this town here quite a few years ago, looked me up because our denominations happen to share ministers, the Presbyterian Church and the United Church of Christ, the Church of the Pilgrims. We formed a rather unlikely friendship. He and I don't always see eye to eye on politics or religion or anything else, but I found him to be a good friend and a good man. And Jason did point out a couple of things that are wrong with this legislation that you have before you. Namely, that you didn't look at it closely enough to even order the sections correctly. There's a section B1 that lists property owners with a contiguous land of less than 5 acres within the city are permitted to keep, harbor, maintain rabbits, chickens. I won't go on. But there's also a section B1 that lists people with 5 acres to 10 acres of land. So it's kind of interesting that there's an oversight there. But then you go on further, and there's a whole nother section B to this ordinance. So you've got a little work to do on this ordinance before it's going to be fit for actually enrolling. You're probably going to have to bring an amendment to make sure all those little things are corrected. And I would just observe that legislation like this, and really all legislation, should be thoroughly vetted ahead of time by committee meetings that you have an involved process of the community in. We've been receiving notice of committee meetings from the chair of the system here, the president of council, not from the individual committee members as required under council rule. That's just kind of a little aside, but it is important, though, that those committee notices come out early if you want to have participation. The committee notice on this piece of legislation came out around 1:30 on Saturday. I don't know about many of you, but 1:30 on Saturday isn't really when I'm checking the roster here to see what you were up to. But if you're interested in having some kind of cooperation, some kind of group that pulls together all that the city has to offer on chickens or really anything else, it might be nice if you would lead that, because you are our elected leaders. You see, we don't need to elect a group or form a coalition or merge all kinds of people together. We pay you to do that. We pay you to figure out how to bring people together on chickens and any other issues that might come up before you, whether or not they're allowed to be spoken about tonight. We pay you to do that work. And you have been doing a lot of work, but we see that it hasn't really gotten us very far, at least according to Section B1, the other Section B1, or the primary Section B in this legislation. I'd submit that it might be important to take a look at all the legislation that you're passing to make sure that you're bringing as many members of the community in and having a conversation that can get us, if not all happy, then at least on the same number and page. Thank you.
Miss McNeely, could you provide the address for the record? We missed it.
Yes, I'll make this quick because we've been here a long time. My name is John Thacker. I live at 990 Columbus Street, apartment 307, Chiillicothe, 4th Warder. First, I want to say, Mr. Mayor, your short reports are almost as long as your long reports. Secondly, I want to congratulate President Geringer on his win in the non-professional category of the Chili Fest, which, by the way, I voted for him, and I figure I should vote for him at least once during my lifetime. Well, you may change my mind somewhere down the road. And I want to remind everybody behind me that you're our neighbors, and you're very passionate about what you believe in, and that's great. You should be here saying what you believe. I think they appreciate it. They just don't. They do want to get back to their families at some point. But I appreciate everybody who came here and wanted to participate. And thank you for being here. Some days it's just me and a couple of other people, a couple of chickens, I think, that wander in by accident that are here at the council meetings. So anyway, that's it. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Thacker, for the comments and the humor. We'll now move to old business. Does anyone have any old business they would like to bring up this evening? Not seeing any participation or correspondence received by the clerk since our last meeting.
Thank you, President Geringer. I've received 2 requests for liquor license. I got them today, and the first is for Parmar Oil Company, 228 North Bridge Street, Chiillicothe, and the second is for 5D Investments LLC, doing business as Southern Ohio Axe Throwing, 35 North Paint Street, Chiillicothe.
Okay. From there, we'll move on to our legislation. We have 10 items on our agenda this evening. Oh, new business. Did I miss? Oh, I jumped ahead. Next to new business. Does anyone have anything new that they would like to bring up this evening?
President Geringer, I think, or I would like to make a motion to amend tonight's agenda, as well as, I guess I would also add to waive the 3-day receipt rule. Same motion. To add a resolution authorizing the appropriate city officials to apply for and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Commission Grant Funds Program for the year 2023, accepting grant funds if awarded and declaring an emergency. Gotcha. Well, first I'll make a motion to, I guess, waive the first. Okay, gotcha. Yep, to amend the agenda to add the resolution I just announced.
Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Miss Henderson to amend the agenda and add legislation. Roll call on the motion.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Motion passes.
I would also like to make a motion that we waive the 3-day receipt rule.
Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Ms. Payne to waive the 3-day receipt rule. Roll call on the motion.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Motion to waive the 3-day receipt rule has passed. Item will be added to the agenda. So now we'll move on to our legislation. We have 11 items on our agenda this evening. Ms. Moss, whenever you're ready, please start with item number 1.
Thank you, President Geringer. Item number 1 is the third reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating $492.31 received from the Chiillicothe Country Club as payment for having a city fire inspector and fire truck in attendance at their members-only fireworks display.
Roll call on the motion. Ordinance, excuse me.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Greg Phillips. Or did I already? Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Sorry.
The ordinance passes. Moving on to item number 2.
Item number 2 is the third reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating a reimbursement check from the State of Ohio Attorney General's Office in the amount of $420.
Roll call on the ordinance.
Payne.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Ordinance passes. Item number 3.
Item number 3 is the third reading of an ordinance accepting and appropriating a reimbursement check from Dana Transport Incorporated in the amount of $954.32.
Roll call on the ordinance.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Ordinance passes. Item number 4.
Item number 4 is the third reading of an ordinance appropriating funds to cover an increase in costs of citywide property and casualty insurance policies and declaring an emergency.
Roll call on the ordinance. Sorry. Did I already skip? 4, yeah.
That was my mistake. All right. Anthony Phillips.
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Greg Phillips.
Yes.
The ordinance passes. Item number 5.
Item number 5 is the second reading of a resolution approving the 2023 health insurance benefits proposal for city employees.
That item will move to our next agenda. Item number 6.
Item number 6 is the second reading of a resolution confirming the appointments of Dr. Richard Villarreal and Dr. Brandy Spalding to the Ross County Health District Board.
That item will move to our next agenda. Item number 7.
Item number 7 is the second reading of an ordinance amending Section 505.14 of the codified ordinances of the City of Chiillicothe as it pertains to livestock being kept or harbored within the corporation limits of the City of Chiillicothe, Ohio.
That item will move to our next agenda. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating $9,962.80 for the purchase of 10 new computers for the Chiillicothe Police Department and declaring an emergency.
President Geringer,
Yes.
I would like to ask at this time to make a motion to waive the 3-read rule.
Motion by Ms. Preston, seconded by Ms. Henderson. Roll call on the motion to waive the 3-read rule.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Roll call on the motion passes. Roll call on the ordinance.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
The ordinance passes. Item number 9.
Item number 9 is the first reading of an ordinance appropriating $4,000 for the use toward the purchase of a credit card machine and monthly credit card machine service charges for the remainder of 2022.
That item will move to our next agenda. Item number 10.
Item number 10 is the first reading of an ordinance approving placement of a Greater Chiillicothe and Ross County Development Corporation sign on the city right-of-way at Gateway Drive and declaring an emergency.
I'd like to make a motion that we waive the 3-read rule on this item.
Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on the motion to waive the 3-read rule.
Payne,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Roll call on the ordinance.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Farrow.
Yes.
The ordinance passes. To you, Terrell.
Due to direction of people smarter than me, I would like to ask to waive the 3-day receipt rule on the resolution that I read earlier.
Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Ms. Henderson. Roll call on the motion to waive the 3D receipt rule for the item previously read. Ms. Henderson.
Payne,
Yes.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Due to the same direction, I would like to ask that we amend tonight's agenda to add that item.
Seconded by Ms. Payne. Motion by Mr. Farrow. Roll call on the motion to add the item to the agenda.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Henderson.
Yes.
Motion passes. Item number 11.
Item number 11 is the first reading of a resolution authorizing the appropriate city officials to apply for and enter into an agreement with the Ohio Public Works Commission, OPWC, grant funds program for the year 2023, accepting grant funds if awarded and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Farrow.
Due to the October 7th application deadline, I'd like to ask that we waive the 3-read rule on this item.
Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Mr. Greg Phillips. Motion to waive the 3-day read rule. Sorry, 3-read rule. Apologies.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Payne.
Yes.
Motion passes. Roll call on the legislation. Ordinance.
Henderson,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Resolution passes.
President Geringer.
Yes, Ms.
I would
Preston.
like to request at this time that the committed legislation to be laid on the table. Would like to
Motion-
request a motion.
Motion by Ms. Preston, seconded by Ms. Payne to lay the committed legislation on the table. Roll call on the motion to table committed legislation.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Nickerson,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
The motion is passed. Are there any additional items that need to be brought up or added at this time? If not, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? Motion by Mr. Farrow, seconded by Ms. Nickerson. Roll call on that motion.
Anthony Phillips,
Yes.
Payne,
Yes.
Farrow,
Yes.
Greg Phillips,
Yes.
Preston,
Yes.
Henderson,
Yes.
Nickerson.
Yes.
Motion passes. We are adjourned. Have a wonderful evening.